So here's a really old model. It's called Dale's Cone of Experience. And if you look down on the bottom, you have things do an actual experience or simulate an actual experience. And those things are down here in the range. If you look in the left-hand side here, it says 90% of what they say or do they can remember. But up at the top, you have read something. We have e-learning content. People said, oh, let's do e-learning. And what did they do? They took that lecture they used to deliver and they made it into a PDF file and put it online. That's e-learning. So now instead of listening, now they just read. It's all the way at the top of that cone. It's the worst experience for learning that you can have. Yeah, I went to the Republic of Georgia in November, and I was on a TV show, and this interviewer said, you know, all we really need is textbooks. That's all someone needs to learn is a textbook. Because you can read it, you can learn the content. Well, you know what? We've had textbooks for hundreds of years. And we still have schools, we still have teachers, you still have professors because you read the textbook and then you have to have a conversation. You have to talk to the other students. You need to talk to the professor. You need to make sense of what it is that you're learning because you have to actively engage in that content. So we know a lot about learning. We know what people need to do, but we kind of have this model of teaching that's just archaic, and that's what we wind up doing for teaching, and that's not the right way. So we knew this in the 20th century, and we still delivered lectures. We know it now in the 21st century. We have really cool technology that's available now that really can actively engage the learner. Now we need to figure out, are we going to be able to do that? So besides learning, we also have models for instruction, which we haven't used very much. These models are fairly new models. Project-based learning, problem-based learning, case-based learning, collaborative learning. Fairly new, meaning 30 years old, 40 years old, okay? So these models are really powerful models to use in a classroom kind of activity, yet we still don't do that. But if you could create e-learning that involved a project where the students have to put, one of the things that I've been playing around with lately is a Web 2.0 tool called Pearl Trees. Anyone here ever use a Pearl Tree? I got one guy up here who's done a Pearl Tree. Pearl Trees are anybody use Pinterest? Several hands go up. So Pinterest is basically a tool that you can find these really cool websites and share them with other people. Well, that's what Pearl Trees does too, except it then represents all these things that you think are really cool in a sort of a tree diagram. So it creates a conceptual model out of all the stuff that you think is really cool. So this is a tool I like playing with, but you could give that to kids, and kids could try to, I want you to understand the whole field of e-learning. I want you to understand the field of computer science. Let's create a Pearl Tree representation of that. And as you find content that you have to read, you then create, you're working down on the bottom of Dale's Cones of Experience, you actually create things. You could create this Pearl Tree. Okay, so the other thing is this is almost a cliche today. We always talk about moving the teacher from the sage on the stage. Again, I keep pointing to what I'm doing right now. The model of a conference is the age-old model of teaching, that you have the sage on the stage telling you all of these really powerful ideas, but what we really want teachers to do is to move off of the stage and be the guide on the side. So in English, it works very nicely because it rhymes. You move from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side, but teachers don't really know how to be that guide on the side because everyone who's a teacher, they went through that education system where the teacher stood in the front of the classroom lecturing to people, so they don't really have a good model. We've come up with some theories in the past 30 years to talk about what does it mean to be the guide on the side, to kind of coach people, to get them engaged in content and then trying to figure out where is it that they're struggling and help them on an individual basis through that content. Okay? So what do students do? Well, students are going to create things. Because again, if you think of Dale's Cone of Experience, the bottom rung on that cone is to get kids to create things, to get learners to create things. I was talking to the gentleman back here. I keep saying learners, kids. I teach at the university. All of my students are teachers. All of them are adults. I still call them kids. And so all my learners I call kids. Doesn't matter if they're adults or not, but I call them kids. But if you're teaching people in business and industry, you want them to engage in the content in the same way. You want them to be producing products. You want them to produce performances, to create content to really make sense of what they're going to do. If you learn it in isolation, they're not going to make use of it in the workplace. If you can teach it in a way that they can actually make use of it, then it's going to be a more powerful learning experience. Teaching and learning. So I've been teaching with technology. I'm the chair of the Learning, Design, and Technology program at the University of Georgia. I've been studying learning for 30 years. I've also, because I'm a little bit hyper, I can't just focus on one thing. So I like learning about technology because technology is ever changing. Learning, it kind of stays stable, but I like technology. So I like figuring out what are powerful ways of using technology for learning. Okay, so early in my career, I was interested in artificial intelligence. So I could get the computer to actually understand what the learner is, where their barriers are to learning, and then help them overcome that barrier, like a human tutor might do. That whole area of research has kind of stalled a little bit. But what I've found over the years of trying to use technology in the classroom, that the most important part of teaching and learning is that human connection. So we're now talking about e-learning. This is the ArabNet conference. We want to use the web for everything. The bottom line is teaching and learning is about a human connection. If you think about the best teachers you ever had in your life, those are the teachers that built a relationship with you. And so what do you want to do with e-learning? People talk about scalable. I want to be able to create content and deliver it to millions of people because I can make a lot of money doing that. But the bottom line is teaching and learning is a human connection, and you have to create that human connection. You need to have teachers that have a small enough number of students that they can create that human connection. And technology can be an awesome tool to make that connection. Yeah, 5 minutes? I told them to pull me off when I go too long. So is the 21st century learner different? Yes and no. So I think of a 21st century, and again I say kids, I think of my child. I have a 13-year-old child. He's got 2 states in his life. He's online, and then he's asleep. Those are the 2 states he's in. Sherry Turkle wrote a book, Together Apart, I live that experience every time I go out to dinner with my son. I take him out to dinner. I think this is a good time for me to talk to my son, talk about important ideas. And we sit at the table, and he's on his phone texting to his friends, and I'm saying, Drew, what? And he doesn't even talk to me. So we're together, but we're apart. And so kids today are hugely connected. Everybody, I talked to a couple people before the session, they talked about social media. Social media, everybody in e-learning wants to use social media for e-learning. You know what? When I've tried to do that with my kids, they don't like it. Their social media is about their connections with their colleagues and their friends, and they don't want education interrupting that flow of conversation. They have their Facebook set up where they're interacting with their family that are far away or friends that are far away in time and space, and they don't want Facebook to then pop up a message to remind me to do my homework. And so I think social media is a powerful thing that we can use, and we ought to exploit with this 21st century learner. But how do you do it in a way that it doesn't interrupt what they're already doing? So I bring back Dale's cone of experience again, because what is it that we can do that can get kids engaged down in the bottom side of this this Dale's cone of experience. And so I just put a couple of things out here. Games, I didn't talk enough about games in this 15 minutes, but my child plays games all the time. Everybody I know plays games. We run a camp called the GameWorks Camp where we teach kids about game design because kids are passionate about games design. We use that as kind of I call it coyote teaching. We get them to focus over here on games because they really are passionate about games, but then we say, and that game needs to explain the rock cycle. So they wind up having to learn geography or geology at the same time that they're learning about games. They think they're learning about games, but we kind of trick them into learning actual content. So games are a powerful tool that we can take advantage of and easily can be delivered over e-learning content. What about Web 2.0 technologies? Well, the nice thing about Web 2.0, the difference between Web 2.0 and Web 1.0 is 1.0, there's somebody who really knew HTML, who's a programmer who created all the content. Now in Web 2.0, everybody creates the content. Well, if we go back to that Dale's cone of experience, do an actual experience. Well, Web 2.0 tools where you're creating things, you're doing an actual experience. So how can we use these Web 2.0 tools where you get your learners to engage in the creation of something? You create something that your company can use. You create something that can transform the way they do work. There's something that helps them understand content. And what about social media connections? Well, again, I've already said social media, people are using it every day. I spend hours on Facebook. But how do we use it in a way that doesn't interrupt that allows them to use those skills and use those talents, but use them for a learning situation? So what about assessment? And again, I don't think I have enough time on this, but one of the things that if you're going to do learning, you also have to do assessment. I have a colleague who says if you don't assess, then you don't learn. And so here's an assessment that we've been working on. Again, the 21st century learner is all about games and simulations. Well, instead of asking a multiple choice question, this is for medical assistants, so nurses, so you have to take vital signs. One of the things in vital signs is take blood pressure. You could ask a multiple choice item about how to take blood pressure, or you can have a 3D simulation of an actual patient and have them on the computer take blood pressure and record that blood pressure. What's the better way of doing assessment? So we have the technology to actually transform the way that we're assessing the learning. So 21st century learner, they're active, they're engaged, they're interactive, and they're social. So how can we use what we know about the 20th century learner to help the 21st century learner learn? Okay?